A good day for our topic, which is victimology, presented in our Google Classroom, is a certain chapter. This this is very particular on the book that we have created, uh, and my part is creating victimology part on that particular book. Okay, so this is the last materials to be presented on our Google Classroom. So just to have the learning objective, which is describing victimology and its concept. So every one of you can really describe what is victimology and its concept. So victimology as an academic term contains two elements. One is the Latin word victima, which is translate into word victim, and from the Greek word logos, which means a system of knowledge, the direction of something abstract, and the direction of teaching, science, and discipline. So, victima and logos. So, victimology is a branch of criminology that scientifically studies the relationship between an injured party and the offender by examining the causes and the nature of the consequent suffering. Specifically, victimology focus on whether the perpetrators were complete strangers, mere acquaintances, friends, family members, or even intimates, and why a particular person or a place was targeted. Criminal victimization may inflict economic cost, physical injuries, and psychological harms. So, what are those key concepts in victimology? So, the word victim has its root in the early religious notions of suffering, sacrifice, and death. This concept of victim was well known in the ancient civilizations, especially in Babylonia, Palestine, Greece, and Rome. In which of these civilizations the law mandated that the victim should be recognized as a person who deserved to be made whole again by the offender. Crime victim is a person who has been physically, financially, or emotionally injured and or had their property taken or damaged by someone committing a crime. Victimogenes refers to the origin or cause of victimizations, the constellations of variables which cause a victimizations to occur. Victim precipitation. A victimization where the victim causes, in part or totally, their own victimization. Vulnerability is a physical, psychological, social, material, or financial condition whereby a person or an object has a weakness, which could render them a victim if another person or a persons would recognize these weaknesses and take advantage of them. The word general victim is a person who has been physically, financially, or emotionally injured and or had their property taken or damaged by someone, an event, an organization, or a natural phenomenon. Victimization, this is refers to an event where persons, communities, and institutions are damaged or injured in significant way. Those persons who are impacted by persons or events suffers a violations of rights or significant disruption of their well-being. As an academic scientific discipline which is victimology, this studies data that describes phenomena and causal relationships related to victimizations. So, abuse of power is the violation of the national and international standard in the use of organized powerful forces such that persons are injured physically, mentally, emotionally, economically, or in their rights as a direct and intentional result of the misapplications of these forces. Victim assistance, or in other words, support or services. Activities which are applied in response to victimizations with the intention of relieving the suffering and facilitating recovery. Victim recovery, the resumption of the same or better level of functionality as was enjoyed prior to victimization. Child abuse, the intentional application of sexual, physical, emotional, or psychological injury to the child to include neglect of the hands of her or his parents or care provider with the confines of their family or place of care. BOM or victim offender mediation, a formal process for face-to-face meetings in the presence of trained mediator between a victim in a crime and his offender who has committed the crime. Restorative justice, a systematic formal legal response to crime victimizations that emphasize healing the injuries that resulted from the crime and affected the victims, offenders, and communities. Victim trauma includes emotional and physical experiences that produce pain and injuries. Crisis intervention, the provision of emergency psychological care to traumatized victims so as to help them return to an adaptive level of functioning and to prevent or mitigate the negative impact of psychological and emotional trauma. Compensation or payment is a formal administrative procedure provided by the law which provides only money to victims for out of the pocket real expenses directly resulting from the victimizations to be paid by the state after the victim are found to qualify according to the specific criteria determined by the respective state or federal law. Restitution, a formal judicial procedure used by a judge after a guilt is determined as a part of a sentence which can provide money and or services to the victim for the damages or suffering which resulted from the victimizations to be paid or performed by the offender. So victim survey, periodic data collections and analysis process conducted usually by the government within the general population to study information about crime victims. Privileges and procedures required by written law which guarantees victim considerations and treatment by the criminal justice system, that is victim rights. So the father of victimology is Hans von Hentig. He developed the typology of victims based on the degree to which victims contributed to causing the criminal act. So by many, victims advocate an attempt to assign equal culpability to the victim. So Hans von Hentig, these are the certain person provided typology of victim. Okay, not the father of victimology, because the father of victimology is Benjamin Mendelssohn. I'm sorry for that. So he is really the famous father, an attorney, often referred as the father of victimology. The Marvin E. Wolfgang, the first empirical evidence to support the notion that victims are to some degree responsible for their own victimizations. Stephen Schaeffer, classifying victims on the basis of propensity or risk, and yet still focus on the victim-offender relationship. Stephen Schaeffer's 1968 typology classifies victims on the basis of their functional responsibility. So if the typology begins with Hans von Hentig, additional typology of the victims given by Stephen Schaeffer, and Menachem Amir undertook one of the first studies of rape. On the basis of the details of Philadelphia police rape records, Amir reported that 19% of all forcibly raped were victim precipitated by such factor as the use of alcohol by both parties, seductive action by the victim, and the victim's wearing of revealing clothing, which could tantalize the offender to the point of misreading the victim's behavior. So that came from Menachem Amir. So theories of victimology will be taken up next meeting. Okay, thank you.